Hi, this is Frank Schaefer, and I would like to talk today about immigration globally and say a few things that no one wants to hear. Maybe we should call this everything you wanted to know about immigration but were afraid to ask. You know, I grew up in Switzerland as the son of right-wing evangelical missionary parents. They were Americans, and they ran a kind of a hippie fundamentalist commune in the Swiss Alps in the 50s, 60s, and 70s when I was growing up. I met my wife Jeannie there, who was traveling in Europe on a Eurail pass as a high school graduation present with her sister, who had just graduated from Berkeley. And they thought they would find a free place to crash, as we used to call it in the 60s, and came to our commune. Well, that was 55 years ago. Jeannie and I have been together ever since. We have 3 kids and 5 grandchildren. I lived the first 23 years or so of my life in Europe. I went to British boarding schools. I've lived in South Africa for 1 year, where I directed 2 feature films, Hollywood movies that I was making at the time. I made a total of 4 before I quit the Hollywood movie business and became a writer. I was given permission by the success of my first novel, Portofino, a work of humor about growing up a fundamentalist Christian, and have since written another 15 books or so. And my memoir, Crazy for God, tells the story of my journey out of evangelical fundamentalism and into a more liberal, progressive mindset. That's my background. And with the perspective of having lived in the United Kingdom for 5 years as a boarding school child in an all-boys boarding school, in South Africa for a year, in Switzerland through my childhood and youth, now in the United States in the same house for the last 45 years, I bring a perspective to the question of immigration that is both American and European. It is not formed in the American racist context. It is not formed in the European context. It's formed kind of internationally. It's also formed by my background in Christianity, something I treasure, which surprises people who know that I fled from evangelicalism. I treasure the teachings of Jesus. I treasure the fact that we are our neighbor's keeper. I treasure the fact that we should treat others as we wish to be treated. I treasure the fact that Western culture is unique in its view of women's rights, gay rights, and the other things that are indeed the fruit of the better parts of Christian teaching, while not in any way ignoring the fact that we had a slave trade, that we have racism, that we were colonists, and all the rest of this. Nevertheless, I'm grateful for my Western Christian inheritance, which surprises some of my liberal secular friends. I describe myself as an atheist who prays. Why do I pray? Because I was raised that way. And as I often say somewhat facetiously, you got a problem with that? In other words, we are who we are psychologically. That's my background. And I wanted to give a little bit of that before I launch into my little talk on immigration. Well, what have we learned about immigration? We've learned unintended consequences from both the left and the right, liberals and secularists, atheists and Christians. Here are the unintended consequences from the left. You know, we were all about more open borders and welcoming people, and we thought, and yes, admit it, that somehow brown people, black people, people of color, whatever name is fashionable right now in the liberal, progressive community, always tumbling over itself, trying to figure out how to talk about things, whether it's race or gender or sex differences. Okay, whatever word you want to use, brown people were going to vote for our candidates because the right wing was racist. People like Trump called Mexicans rapists. We thought, oh, well, somehow brown people who immigrate will vote for our people, that we're going to have a future of a mixture of white liberal votes, white liberal educated and working class brown people mowing our lawns, picking our vegetables and our grapes and whatever it may be. And somehow that will give the Democrats a future. What a miscalculation, because those, quote, brown people, those people of color, whatever we call them today, that is fashionable in progressive circles that we're allowed to say, whatever that is, that group of people turned out to be Pentecostal Christians who were pro-life. They turned out to be against homosexuality and divorce. They turned out to be on the other side of the culture war, as in fact many black Christians are, whether they're from Africa or Haiti or African Americans born here in this country, the descendants of the slave trade. They too often are on the culture war issues, not liberals. This comes as a shock to the educated liberal community, the kind of people who write op-ed pieces for the New York Times and the New Yorker etc. Okay, the unintended consequence of immigration from a liberal, progressive point of view, I didn't say an honest point of view, a liberal, progressive point of view, often that goes unstated, is this. These people turned around and bit us in the butt and voted for Donald Trump in significant enough numbers on culture war issues, having been affronted and scandalized by the fallout from the 1960s and 70s war on the dominant Christian culture of chastity before marriage, of virginity being something treasured until one's wedding night. All these things that were taken for granted by generations of people, whether they were kept or not is another matter. A lot of hypocrisy involved, as you well know. But nevertheless, that was the ideal. And the same when it came to gay sex, gay marriage, etc., let alone trans redefinition of pronouns and all the rest of it. This kind of trolling of the right by the left through the culture war, and I'm not commenting on the culture war itself, that's not this discussion, but nevertheless was taken as trolling by the right. The brown people pouring across the border that the left thought would automatically vote for them once they became citizens actually began to vote for the right, because these are church-going people. They are Roman Catholics. They are Pentecostal Christians. They are speaking in tongues in their meetings. They're enjoying prophecies and all the rest of it. Now, here's the double miscalculation when it comes to American immigration from the south of our border. On the south of our border are essentially Christian people, people who share the worldview with, to put it very bluntly and crudely, the Heritage Foundation's ideas in Project 2025. A lot of those people would sign off on those things when it comes to pro-family, pro-child, anti-abortion, etc. Deal with it. And so the great miscalculation from the left was thinking that the open border policy, the generous receive the stranger policy, all the things, the way we dress this up of an open border was going to redound to our benefit, give us a future of a combination of educated white liberals and brown people who would be voting for us because, hey, the alternative are racist pigs, right? And we all know that to be the case, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. That backfired, and a lot of those people voted for Donald Trump because the culture war issues were actually stronger in their way of thinking than economic issues, which the liberal media, the university folks and all the rest never want to admit. And that is that the culture war actually is lost and has driven away a huge chunk of the American public, including people who would vote for Democrats when it comes to economic issues or even race issues. Okay, that's the first unintended consequence. The unintended consequence from the right is their stupidity in having these racist pigs in the White House running a program of driving away their best future voters, which are Pentecostal Christians, Roman Catholics, conservative Hispanic people with traditional views of gender, traditional views of sex differences, traditional views of gay sex, traditional views of marriage, traditional views of childbearing. Close the border, keep them out because they're brown. Nowhere is the racism of the right wing more evident in its shoot itself in the foot policy of closing the border to immigration, of people who would come in and actually, much to the horror of liberals, vote quite often for conservative Republican candidates on family values. But the conservative right wing is so racist now that they would rather lose elections or claim that the election was stolen or cheat or not have future elections so they can win anyway, rather than admit that these people vote for Republicans based on culture war issues. So you have a double blindness, a double whammy from both sides, a total misunderstanding of who, quote, these people are. Now, there's another idea about immigration, and that is that has to be confronted now, and that is the birth dearth, the demographic trajectory that we are on. For instance, North Korea and Korea, South Korea have one thing in common, both the North and the South. They're not having very many babies. They're on a trajectory line of 96% total elimination of the Korean people based on the next 100-year arc if they continue this way. And the same thing's happening here, not to everybody. Not to Orthodox Jews, not to conservative Christians, not to trad wives, not to Mormon families that are still into having children. And by the way, not to my family. I'm a father of 3 grown children. I have 5 grandchildren. 3 live across the street. The greatest pleasure of my life is taking care of my grandchildren and providing for them and protecting them and being a child caregiver and teaching them to cook and teaching them carpentry and being with them and driving to school so their parents can work. I am the child caregiver. So is my wife, Jeannie. And I don't just tag along as a male and let the women do most of the work. And this has nothing to do with modern feminism or I've got to do this to keep my wife happy. I love childcare. I love my children. I love my grandchildren. I'm 73 years old. It's the greatest meaning of my life. But not everyone feels that way. The Women's Studies Project, the Career Project, the Glass Ceiling Project, the Get the Corner Office Project, the Put Women in Comeback Project, the Equality Project, the ideas of feminism in the 1970s had many, many good things about it. But one of the downsides was the worship of career. In other words, let women make the same mistake men had made by thinking that money and prestige and power and the car you drive and the handbag you own is a phenomena that we all ought to sign in on. The sort of epitome and the joke version of this being the Kardashians on one side, and then on the other people like Trump and these cage fighters and these guys who hold themselves up as real men and all the rest. One thing they all have in common is essentially they're pro-materialism, pro-looks, how you look, bulked up, everything, whatever it is, plastic surgery, lip fillers, and all the rest. And the last thing you think about is being a father, a mother, or a grandfather, like I spend my time being with my grandchildren. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours invested in these beautiful children. Okay, the demographic loss of babies is now being filled by these crazy tech people like Elon Musk, who is inseminating all these women randomly and then suing them if they don't do what he says, or cutting off their child support and using IVF and all sorts of genetic testing to try to have genius children. This is the brave new world. This is an apocalypse of its own. I'm not talking about family like that. There's only one reason to have a child. And that's to experience the deepest love that life offers, period. It's not to grow the population. It's not to go to Mars. It's none of these things. It's that everything else in life pales by comparison to being a father, a mother, a grandfather, a lover. These are the things that count. But when you take the pressure the sexual revolution put on procreation and the pill and all this other stuff, it didn't result in more people having happier lives. In fact, the younger people today are the unhappiest generation that has been measured in my lifetime. And one thing they're doing is not even dating. Many of them aren't having sex. When they do, it's porn-fed sex of choke a girl out or having grown up watching rape on your phone, as a 12-year-old boy and learning how to do it that way, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is a disaster. The entire sexual revolution has blown up in the face of the American left wing and the European left wing. And one of the results is people aren't having children. And then the careerism of the feminism has blown up in the faces of the left. The result is going to be that most children go in a certain direction similar to their parents. I didn't. I've gone to the left. My parents were to the right. I've gone away from Christianity. I call myself an atheist who prays now. That said, most people don't. The future belongs to Mormons and Orthodox Jews and conservative Christians. The liberals are going to die out. There will be nobody on the Upper West Side at all, except maybe Muslim immigrants who come to America now to clean up on whatever's left of America and Christendom, or other people who come in, whoever it may be. But the fact of the matter is we've created a vortex that is sucking us all in. One, we're not having babies. When I say we, I don't mean me. I don't mean conservatives. I mean the kind of liberal elite who think so highly of themselves that they try to direct other people's lives and turn, for instance, medical issues and scientific issues into social engineering projects that were meant to train the uncouth and the unwashed and the young and turn men into feminists and all the rest of it. The whole thing is disintegrated. And we have Trump. How's it working out for you? We have Trump. I ask that to everybody, left and right. How's it working out for you? The most corrupt, venal person that's ever been in the White House, who has turned this gold-plated office into one of personal revenge on others, a Republican Party that's not a political party anymore, but a sycophantic cult. How's it working out for you? Okay, immigration in that light is also a disaster. We need immigration in America because we're not having the babies, and how lucky we are that our southern border is filled with brown people who come into a Western country like the United States informed by Christianity. Sorry, that's our history. Deal with it. As Bible-believing Christians, as charismatics, as Catholics, one generation away from that tradition, if not personally going to church. How fortunate we are from the point of view of evangelicals and Catholics who ought to be welcoming them and saying how lucky we are that we have people who are on the same page culturally to us. Now look at Europe. Their southern border is one Islamic country after another. I'm sorry. We're living in an age when if you talk about how the Israelis are treating Palestinians, you're an anti-Semite. And if you talk about the fact that Europe is unfortunate in the fact that wave after wave of Islamic immigration has come in, changing the culture, in a culture that itself is not having babies, then you're Islamophobic. But you know what, folks? It's time we are able to discuss real issues without labeling people who bring up something that's inconvenient to us and then dismissing the rest of what they say. The fact of the matter is American immigration comes from people who are Pentecostal Christians, Roman Catholics, and others from South and Central America. European immigration is preponderantly now coming from North Africa and other Islamic countries, and they are not part of Western culture. That is not an insult to Islam. It's just a fact. In Saudi Arabia, women do not have rights. That's a fact. In Iran, you're put in a prison and raped if you don't wear a hijab. That's a fact. The fact of the matter is, in Afghanistan, girls cannot have more than a 6th grade education. That's a fact. The fact of the matter is that one of the things that happens between the United Kingdom and Pakistan is relatives of girls who lose their virginity or even watch the wrong video trick them into going back to Pakistan so another relative can honor kill them. That's a fact. You can't escape this fact. You can't escape the trail of terror that has bedeviled European countries ever since this whole wave began. And whose fault is it? It's not the fault of the Islamic immigrants. It's the fault of the European colonialists who thought they could march into North Africa, shape other cultures, that you could invite people from those cultures to your country to work as cheap labor and never assimilate them and never help them and treat them racially awfully. The French are racists. The Belgians have been racists. The British have been racists. And now they are reaping the whirlwind. But the fact of the matter is, there's a vast difference between Islamic immigration into Europe and our southern border. So I'm talking to an American audience now. Deal with it. I'm sorry. Throw the labels you want at me. I'm just talking about history and the over 1,400 years of conflict between Islam and the West. All the invasions of each other, the Crusades in both directions. That's a fact. That's the background. This is an uneasy relationship. Deal with it. And we haven't moved past it because a few lovely pastors and theologians, people like Karen Armstrong and the others, say religion is wonderful and we're all in the same boat. We're not. There are different philosophical presuppositions. And for one thing, we have a separation of church and state in the West, which is unknown in other cultures. There's no separation of church and state in Islam. There is no separation from the will of the mullah in Islam. It dictates everything. And the more fundamentalist you are, the more that is the case. That's a fact. So here in the United States, we've done the stupidest thing imaginable. Liberals have thought that these people will vote for us. They don't. And yet we go ahead and insult them by, for instance, when we have a pro-life march saying that if you're pro-choice march, rather, and if you're pro-life, we won't include you because we only allow people in the Democratic Party who are in step with us on our culture war issues. They have to use the pronouns we tell them to use. They have to tell you what you want to hear when it comes to the issue of choice. By the way, I'm pro-choice. I didn't used to be 40, 50 years ago, but I am now. I changed my point of view, but that's nothing to do with throwing a tent that's big enough to actually win elections. So my view of immigration is really simple. I am grateful that on our southern border are people who long to come into America, work hard, pay taxes, contribute to our culture. I'd bring them in and give them citizenship tomorrow. And let the chips fall where they may. If they vote for Republicans, fine. Because we need them. Why? Because you're not having babies. You're chasing your career instead. And our culture is going to collapse because of it. That's the one thing Elon Musk is correct about. His solution of philandering and hitting up on every woman who works for him is not the solution that I would recommend. But the problem is real. So you can't have it two ways. You can't not have babies and also shut your borders to immigration. How lucky we are. We have all these clever Asian people from India. And that includes Muslims, by the way, and Pakistan and other places who want to come into our culture and work hard and build our society. We have these brilliant people studying in our universities. And yet Trump is making war on our universities because they take foreign students and then he won't give them visas when they want to stay. Stupid. We need them. And how lucky we are that the vast majority of people pushing into our southern borders when the border was open are the kind of people who are ready to sign on the dotted line for democracy and separation of church and state and civil rights. Because they may be at a different point in their journey when it comes to Christianity, but they're on the same road that liberal progressivism is that comes out of that same background. I'm sorry, the Enlightenment was nothing more than a Christian heresy. Voltaire and the others, their only condemnation of Christianity is that it didn't live up to the standards set by the teachings of Jesus Christ. So let's be honest about all these things. Let's have a much more open border. Let's welcome the stranger. Let's give them work in our country. Let's give the visa to the Indian and the Pakistani student and the Islamic clever student who will come in and help us with our engineering projects, our mechanical engineering, our computer engineering projects. Let's be grateful for and pay and care for the child caregiver, the person mowing the lawn, picking the vegetables, help them sign into the American dream. Let's get away from all this stupid overregulation by Democrats that are so much concerned with another study and another environmental study and so forth that they basically shut the parts of the economy they plan in. Let's have a new look at the whole thing, but part of that is to welcome the immigrant. How lucky we are from any point of view. The Republicans have denied everything they say they stand for by shutting our doors to immigration. They are racist. That's their only reason, because these are Christian people who would vote for Republican candidates as they voted for Donald Trump because of culture war issues. What irony. And the left is no better. The left is no better because we continue to troll the right with our absolutism and our fundamentalist principles on gender and pronouns and trans issues and gay issues, as if somehow, unless someone signs up for all this, we don't want them. Well, welcome to your future, you who have no babies or one child when you're 40. Welcome to your future. It's empty. We need immigration. My name is Frank Schaefer.